Welcome to you. So the 12 days of Christmas are up later this week. The last mince pie's been eaten, the presents have been opened, and I wonder what you received this year. If you were expecting your nearest and dearest to get you 11 maids a milking or 7 swans a swimming, I suspect you were disappointed. But what we will have received is the promise of the angels, the sense of wonder and mystery as we thought about Mary and Joseph, the shepherds, and the newborn baby Jesus. In him, there's that wonderful promise of peace, of joy, of hope for the future. In Jesus, the light of the world, Emmanuel, God with us, has come. And now as we move into a new year, we look forward to Epiphany, recalling those stargazers who journeyed to find the child. Epiphany so often seems to get lost these days. It just marks the day we take the decorations down, if we haven't already done it. We put the figures into our nativity scenes before Christmas, and we forget that these men, the Magi, came along some time after Jesus was born. And they come because they associate the rising of a star in the east with the birth of the new king in Judah, promise fulfilled. They're prepared to leave their homes and to follow the star to find the new king. Knowing that the star was a sign, not knowing how long it would take them or where, they went. Not content with sending ambassadors to see Jesus and waiting at home for a second-hand account of the birth to reach them, they went themselves, prepared to face a long and exhausting journey across deserts, mountains, national boundaries. They only knew it was important to follow the star wherever it led. And their quest led them to Jesus, the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, the one before whom one day every knee shall bow. They went first to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews?" When Herod heard of this, he was not a happy man. The Emperor Augustus once said it was safer to be Herod's pig than his son. Herod had murdered 3 of his own sons, and he certainly wasn't going to put up with a new king who would threaten his throne. So he secretly met with the Magi and urged them to go and see what might be happening in Bethlehem. If they found this child that they seek, they were to bring him word that he too may come and worship. It's got to be one of the most insincere speeches of all time. The Magi moved away from Jerusalem and followed the star until it stopped over the place where the child was. They bowed down and they worshipped. There was no palace or gold or servants, and yet they recognized Jesus. They knelt before him. And God watched them through the eyes of that child, Jesus. The Magi weren't empty-handed. They brought gifts, gold, frankincense, myrrh. And perhaps more importantly, they brought themselves. Having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned home by a different route. Herod was furious when the Magi didn't return to him, and it led to a terrible cost, as all children under 2 were slaughtered. It's a darker side of the story we'd perhaps prefer not to hear. But Jesus was born into a world of political insecurity, prejudice, fear, where there are refugees and the death of innocent people. Anything changed much, do you think? Jesus came as Prince of Peace, and yet so much of our world lives with violence or only fragile peace. There's still racism, prejudice, fear of those with different beliefs and values. Those Magi were the first Gentiles that we know of to worship Jesus, to pay homage to him, unknown strangers from a distant land. Where were the Jewish leaders and wise men? Many of them had spent their lives praying for the coming of the Messiah, studying scripture, people who should have welcomed him, and yet they failed to recognize his coming. Matthew is often seen as the most Jewish of the 4 Gospels, and yet right at the beginning of it, he shows us that Christ has come for all people, opening the doors of heaven to everyone who believes in him. Even as a young child, Jesus was breaking down barriers, reaching out, inviting outsiders in, including those we may not expect or we may not welcome, people that don't fit the mold as we see it. And if we are to call ourselves Christ's disciples, we must continue his work, his mission, here, now. As the Apostle Paul said, thanks be to God for his indescribable gift.